Not all Wrangler engines are built the same. Some struggle to survive 150,000 miles. Others routinely cross 300,000 miles and keep going. So today, I'm revealing the only 3 Wrangler engines that have truly earned a reputation for longevity, and one of them hasn't been built in nearly 20 years. Third on this list is the 2.5-liter AMC 4-cylinder. This is the engine almost nobody talks about. It came in the Wrangler from 1987 all the way to 2002, and on paper, it shouldn't even be on this list. It only makes around 120 horsepower and 135 pound-feet of torque in the Wrangler tune. It's so slow that bolting on bigger tires basically ends the fun. So why is it sitting at number 3 on a list of 300,000-mile engines? Because the people who own one have a secret. This little four-banger refuses to die. The reason comes down to engineering. A lot of people online will tell you the 2.5-liter AMC is just a 4.0-liter straight 6 with the middle 2 cylinders chopped off. That's not actually true. AMC's chief engineer Roy Lunn confirmed years ago that the 2.5 had its own shorter stroke, bigger bore, larger valves, and totally new pistons. But it does share the same family DNA as the 4.0-liter 6. Same cast iron block construction, same cast iron head, same brutal, simple AMC design that Jeep nuts worship. There's no timing belt to snap on you. The valve train uses old-school push rods that almost never fail, and there's nothing fancy on this engine that wants to break. AMC engineers built it from day one for Jeep duty. The whole goal was performance and durability, and they nailed it. One quick warning before we go further. People sometimes mix this engine up with the old GM Iron Duke 2.5 that lived in the older CJ Jeeps from the 80s. They're not the same engine. They're not even close. The AMC 2.5 is the only one that earns a spot on this list. Owners on Jeep forums talk about these engines like they're alive. One driver crossed 200,000 miles and said the only thing he ever did was change the oil and swap the spark plugs. Wikipedia even points out that some 2.5-liter Jeeps have rolled past 300,000 miles on basic maintenance alone. Vehicle History writes that there are plenty of these motors still on the road today, past the 300,000 mark. And one of the best parts about owning one is parts cost. Because the 2.5 shares so many internal pieces with the 4.0-liter 6, if anything ever does go wrong, the replacement parts are cheap and everywhere. But the 2.5 has one big weak spot. It's painfully slow. If you bolt 33-inch tires on it without re-gearing your axles, you'll be climbing hills in second gear with the pedal mashed to the floor and traffic stacking up behind you. Now the strange part is this. That weakness is also the reason it lives so long. Because the engine can't really stress itself out, it just runs. It almost never gets pushed hard enough to hurt itself. And because the 2.5 shares so much design DNA with the bulletproof 4.0-liter 6, we'll get to in a minute, the parts that do wear out are cheap and easy to find at any junkyard in America. If you want one to go the distance, do this. Get the 5-speed manual. The old 3-speed automatic chokes the life out of this engine. Pair the 2.5 with the manual gearbox, change the oil every 3,000 miles with a quality synthetic, and keep the cooling system flushed. That's the whole playbook. A lot of mechanics will tell you this is the most underrated Wrangler engine ever built. You won't see it in YouTube hype videos. You won't see it on the cover of any magazine. But the people who own them know what they have. They put 200,000 miles on them and barely think about it. They pass them down to their kids, and the engine just keeps running. And speaking of engines that get hyped way too much, before we move on, there's one Wrangler engine you should run from if you actually want to hit 300,000 miles. That's the 3.8-liter V6 Jeep stuffed into the 2007 to 2011 JK Wranglers. It came straight out of a Chrysler minivan. It makes only 202 horsepower, and it burns oil like it's getting paid by the court. JP Magazine reported that 2 of their own 3.8 Wranglers died right around 100,000 miles. By the very end, those engines were burning oil so badly that even a quick highway trip would empty out the dipstick. Stay far away from this one if longevity matters. Okay, so that's the worst one out of the way. Now let's talk about the comeback story. Because the engine sitting at number 2 had a rough start before it became a legend. Before we move on, if your goal is to get 300,000 miles or more out of your Jeep, check out my 500,000-mile Jeep blueprint. It covers the exact maintenance habits that help Wranglers last longer and avoid expensive repairs. Link in the description below. Now let's get back to the countdown. Second on this list is the 3.6-liter Pentastar V6. This is the engine in basically every modern Wrangler from 2012 onward, and the road it took to get here was rough. Because when it first hit the road, it had a serious problem. In 2011 and 2012, the left cylinder head on this engine had a defect. Cylinder number 2 would overheat, the valve seats would warp, the engine would misfire and stall out, sometimes on the highway. Doug Betts, who ran quality at Chrysler at the time, told Automotive News that around 7,500 of these engines had the issue. That works out to about 0.5% of every Pentastar built up to that point. So not a huge number, but enough to wreck the engine's reputation for a few years. But Chrysler did something most car companies never do. They didn't paper over the problem. They redesigned the left head with hardened valve guides and beefier valve seats. They extended the warranty on the bad heads to 10 years and 150,000 miles. And by mid-2012, the new design was bolted onto every engine rolling off the line. You can actually spot a fixed head by the part number stamp. Anything stamped 2062 or higher means it was built on day 206 of 2012 or later, which means it's the good one. Then in 2016, Chrysler upgraded the Pentastar again. They added two-step variable valve lift. They added a cooled EGR system, which fixed the brittle early part that caused half the early Pentastar hate. They bumped the compression ratio, new intake design, new injectors. The 2016 and later version makes 285 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque, and it's been quietly bulletproof ever since. Want proof of how tough this engine really is? In 2020, a 2014 Ram ProMaster cargo van running the exact same 3.6-liter Pentastar V6 cracked 626,000 miles before it finally gave out. Now I have to be straight with you, that's a van, not a Wrangler. But it uses the exact same Pentastar engine, with the same internal parts and the same overall design. When mechanics tore it down on camera, the oil pump was still in perfect shape. The cylinder walls still had the factory cross-hatching on them from the original honing job. The rod bearings looked like they had thousands more miles left in them. The only thing that killed the whole motor was a broken plastic timing chain guide. The actual block, head, and rotating parts were basically immortal. For Wranglers specifically, the proof is all over the forums. One guy posted up a 2012 JK at 192,000 miles, never cracked open. There's a Seattle taxi Wrangler running past 170,000 miles with nothing ever done to the engine. And one owner on a 2013 four-door JK Unlimited rolled it past 279,000 miles before deciding to rebuild it just for peace of mind. The engine wasn't broken. He just wanted it fresh for the next 200,000. So what makes this thing live so long? It uses an all-aluminum block with cast iron cylinder liners pressed into it. So you get the light weight of aluminum, but the tough wear surface of iron right where the pistons rub. There are piston cooling oil jets that spray the bottom of every piston, keeping them from cracking under heat. And the block has a deep skirt design that locks the crankshaft in like a vault. The number behind this engine family is huge. Stellantis has built over 16 million Pentastar V6 engines across their entire lineup, with the 3.6 being by far the most common version. That's not a typo, that's 16 million engines. But the Pentastar has two known weak spots you have to plan for. First, the oil filter housing on top of the engine is plastic. Over time, it cracks and starts leaking oil and coolant all over the front of the engine. Replace it before it fails, and you're fine. Second, the plastic timing chain guides eventually wear out past 200,000 miles. Not a death sentence, just a service item you have to budget for. Oh, and one more tip. Spark plug changes on this engine are a real pain because you have to pull the intake manifold off to reach the back 3 plugs. Just budget extra labor money when it's time. Owners who hit 300,000 with this engine all do the same simple things. They run full synthetic oil. They don't stretch their oil change intervals to save $30 at the shop. They flush the coolant every 60 to 80,000 miles. And they don't sit in their driveway idling for an hour straight. That's the whole secret. There's one more thing worth knowing. Jeep also sold a mild hybrid version of this engine called the e-Torque Pentastar, which uses a small 48-volt belt-driven motor to smooth out the stop-start system. It's the same Pentastar underneath, with the same long life as the regular version. Just don't confuse it with the 2.0-liter Turbo Hurricane that came along in the JL Wrangler, or with the 3.0-liter EcoDiesel V6. Those are completely different engines, with very different reputations. The EcoDiesel got hit with a fuel pump recall back in 2023 because the high-pressure pump can blow apart and send metal shrapnel through the entire fuel system. The 2.0-liter Hurricane is too new to crown either, and at least one owner has already reported a blown head gasket at 87,000 miles on the forums. The 3.6-liter Pentastar is the modern Wrangler engine with the actual proven track record. If you're shopping for a modern Wrangler and you want one that goes the distance, grab a 2016 or newer 3.6-liter Pentastar. That's the sweet spot. All the early problems fixed, all the 2016 upgrades baked right in. Now this engine is great. However, it's still not number one on this list, because the engine sitting in the top spot is the one veteran mechanics call the most reliable engine Jeep ever made, and it hasn't been built in nearly 20 years. Number one is the 4.0-liter AMC inline-six. If you ask any old-school Jeep potential, the most viable engine mechanics, any forum elder, any guy who's been turning wrenches on Jeeps since the 1990s, what the most reliable Wrangler engine of all time is, they all say the same three words: the 4.0. This engine lived in the Wrangler from 1991 to 2006. It made about 190 horsepower in most years and pulled up to 235 pound-feet of torque in the later TJ models, and it would just run forever. But almost nobody knows this part. The 4.0 liters family tree goes all the way back to 1964. AMC engineers designed the bones of this engine for the 1964 Rambler Classic. They called it the torque command, and they did something most car companies never bothered with back then. They gave it a 7-main bearing crankshaft. That means the spinning crank inside the engine was supported in 7 different spots inside the block instead of the usual 4 or 5. That's overbuilt for a passenger car engine of that era. A road test magazine back in 1964 wrote that the new crankshaft could handle way more pressure from the pistons, and that the engine would last much longer because of it. Those engineers were right. That same engine family powered the very first Jeep Wrangler YJ in 1987, starting out as the 4.2-liter version. Chrysler bought AMC that same year and kept refining the design. By 1991, they'd evolved it into the 4.0-liter fuel-injected version we know today, with their own engine management system replacing the older Renault Bendix unit called Renix. The new 4.0 made 190 horsepower, and they called it the high-output version. That was the engine that landed in the YJ Wrangler in 1991, replacing the older 4.2-liter. And it carried straight through to the end of the TJ in 2006. By the time the 4.0-liter finally died, it was already a Jeep legend. So why is it so unkillable? Because almost nothing on it can actually break. It's got a cast iron block, a cast iron head, and a simple pushrod valve train. There's no timing belt that can leave you stranded on the side of the road. The whole engine runs on old-school mechanical parts, so there are no variable valve solenoids or direct injection injectors to gum up. The inline-six layout is naturally balanced, which means the engine doesn't shake itself to pieces over the years the way some V6 designs can. And that 7-main bearing crankshaft handles abuse that would crack a normal engine clean in half. Owners on Wrangler forums casually drop mileage numbers like they're nothing. One guy posted up a 1997 4.0 sitting at 336,000 original miles, still running strong. Another owner's 1994 YJ is past 285,000, and there's a 1998 TJ out there past the 300,000-mile mark. CarBuzz summed the whole thing up perfectly. They wrote that 300,000 to 400,000 miles on this engine with basic maintenance is just the norm. There's even a guy named Dan Eicher who took his 1987 YJ past 543,000 miles. Now, I'll be straight with you on that one. His Jeep actually ran the older 4.2-liter version of this same inline-six family, not the exact 4.0-liter we're talking about. And he did swap in a fresh long block somewhere around the 400,000-mile mark, so it's not all on one motor. But think about that for a second. He trusted the AMC inline-six family enough to keep beating on it past 500,000 miles. That tells you everything you need to know. The 4.0 liter isn't perfect though. It has a few weak spots you need to know about before you buy one. The exhaust manifold cracks past 150,000 miles, almost without fail. That's a cheap fix, and almost every high-mileage 4.0 has had it done at some point. If you're shopping for a 2000 or 2001 model, watch out for the casting number 0331 on the driver's side of the head. Those heads were known to crack between cylinders 3 and 4. By mid-2001, Chrysler fixed it with a new head they called the Tupi casting. So the safest model years to buy with this engine are 1995 to 1999, plus the very last TJ Wranglers from 2003 to 2006. The crank position sensor and the fuel injectors can also start leaking past 150,000, but those are $50 parts. None of these are deal breakers. They're cheap fixes, and there's a YouTube video for every single one of them. But the deeper reason this engine became a legend has nothing to do with parts. The 4.0 liter wasn't born in a marketing meeting. It wasn't built to hit a fuel economy target on some government chart. It was a holdover from a dying car company that just happened to be too good to throw away. When Chrysler bought AMC in 1987, they didn't even really want the old inline-six at first. They thought it was outdated. Push rods in the 1990s? That was for Buick grandpas, not modern trucks. But every single time Chrysler tried to replace it with a more modern V6, the V6 broke down. The 4.0 just kept running, so they kept bolting it into Wranglers for another 20 years. That's why veteran mechanics call it the most reliable engine Jeep ever bolted into anything. Not just the most reliable Wrangler engine, the most reliable Jeep engine, period. One more piece of perspective before we wrap. The 4.0 isn't actually fast. It won't outdrag a Camry. It won't beat a modern Pentastar off the line. But the real genius of this engine has nothing to do with speed. It's about the fact that 35 years after the first one rolled off the line, tons of them are still on the road today. Plenty of them are already on their third or fourth owner. They just keep moving down the highway like nothing can stop them. If you can find a clean 1996 to 1999 TJ Wrangler with the 4.0 liter and a 5-speed manual, buy it. That combo will outlive you, your kids, and probably your grandkids if you take care of it. That's not hype. That's just what these engines do. Those are the only 3 Wrangler engines that have proven they can go the distance. Now tell me, which engine do you have and how many miles are on it right now? Drop your mileage in the comments below. If you found this helpful, hit subscribe and tap on the video in your screen right now for more Wrangler tips, maintenance advice, and Jeep secrets. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.